Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a new weekly podcast shining a spotlight on Australian fiction. My name is Claudine Tinellis. As a writer and avid reader, I love chatting about books. And in this podcast, I'll chat to authors, publishers and readers, giving you, dear listener, insight into what's hot on the Australian fiction scene. So if you're looking for your next book recommendation or just want to know more about Aussie fiction writers, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and enjoy. Lawrence McMahon is a Melbourne-based writer whose writing career began as a medical student. And in the 30-plus years that followed, he has won multiple national and regional short story awards. Remarkably, somewhere in and around his busy medical career and current position as Professor of Nephrology at Monash University, Lawrence has managed to write an astonishing debut novel drawing on his experiences as a medical professional both in Australia and abroad. The book is called As Swallows Fly and was published by Ventura Press in early March of 2021. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak with Lawrence on the podcast today. Welcome, Lawrence.
Thanks so much, Claudine. It's great to be here.
I have said this numerous times on the podcast before, but it is no less true in your case. I am amazed that this novel is your debut. So congratulations. You must be thrilled with it.
The fact that it actually got off the ground at all was an extraordinary event for me, and I'm most gratified that it's found the light of day. It really gave some justification to me, but also strangely to the characters. I felt that they really deserved to be read about. So that was great.
Are you happy with the reception it's been getting?
Can always do better. But yes, look, I think all the comments and reviews that I have seen appear to have been favourable, and that's been really gratifying. Yeah.
Now, as I said, 30 or more years writing around a busy medical career. Was it always your intention to write a novel one day?
Yes, but it was hard to put a timeline on it, to be honest, because the life in academic and clinical medicine is pretty time consuming. I had a family of 4 children to raise, and the combination of training and maintaining a research profile and everything else that went with it meant that all other ideas had to, for a while, take a back seat. I suppose that gave me time, by the same token, to soak up a whole array of experiences and thoughts and attitudes, and that has probably come to fruition eventually. And once I meaningfully started to write again and to really learn how to write properly, which took a couple of years, the novel just seemed to open itself up to me, because I found the parallel short story setting, although it was highly disciplined, it was also somewhat restrictive. And so that was where the novel seemed to call.
How long did it take you to write As Swallows Fly?
People have asked me that, and the actual writing wasn't so bad. It probably took me a couple of years, all in all, to put that together with all the help that you get along the way from workshops and so forth, and rewrites and what have you. I had actually written an ambitious novel before that, which was kind of my learning experience. And what I did from that was to I really liked the main character in that, but the rest of it was a bit of a disaster. But the main character, I actually took her main traits and took them into this novel with a whole lot of different attitudes and life experiences and so forth. But nonetheless, the central heart of the character was there in the first. So, and that was probably a couple of years before that. Put it together and you've got about 4 years, I suppose.
This was a beautiful story, Lawrence, a book about 2 women from different cultures. It was a book that I felt privileged to read in that it offered, for me, a unique and fascinating insight into the medical profession and the vulnerability of the people that society holds to such high standards. So I wanted to ask you, where did you draw your inspiration for this novel from?
It's a good question. There were two sources, I think, really. One of them was for the main character, Kate, as a female plastic surgeon. The inspiration, I think, lay in the twin and interwoven aspects of the challenges that doctors, particularly female doctors, face in developing their career, and the pursuit, combined with that, the pursuit of perfection, both personally and also medically, and how everybody is geared around that, whether they really want to admit it or not, from an academic and clinical perspective. And that's quite pronounced, and I think it's a very difficult task to fulfill. We have very high standards. We insist on them ourselves, and so we should. But we're all human as well, and that to me, I think, was a constant right through my years in medicine. That need to be at the highest level, but also that capacity to fail at any time because of human error. And I think the other thing, and again, particularly coming back to the female side of things, it was this demand on women for perfection, both physically and in their own personalities, to be able to achieve all things. I felt was an interesting and worthy development that has occurred particularly in the last 30 years or so. If you combine those, it seemed to have a lot of fruit for the picking, if you forgive the analogy. But the second inspiration was about when I was working in Pakistan in this village I visited. There was somehow word had got out that there was a Western doctor in the village, and it was awfully humbling and very difficult and awkward. People had been brought. I remember one poor patient being wheeled 30 miles by her sons and they looked to me to be able to cure her, but unfortunately she had multiple strokes and there was absolutely nothing I could do. But within this village was a young, super bright girl who somehow was able to pick up what was going on and even had a rudimentary grasp of English, and I don't know where she got it from, but was able to convey the issues to the family and was super keen just to sort of be there and be engaged and be involved. And my thought at the time was, what chance have you got? You are at a subsistence level village. What could you do in the world if you had an opportunity? That then kind of stayed with me, and it sort of developed and matured and ended up with the other main character in the book, who of course is Malika.
Yeah, absolutely fascinating. So Lawrence, for those who haven't read this book, can you tell me a little bit more about the story?
Sure. So I've introduced the two main characters. The key thing is that both of these characters are seriously flawed. One in a physical way, and that follows an event which occurs to Malika just before she leaves to begin her journey across to Melbourne. And of course, Kate also is psychologically abused and tormented by her unforgiving mother and has her own serious issues personally. At least the thing that saves Kate, of course, is the size of her heart and her wish always to do the best thing by her patients. And it's the interaction really that ensues Kate's role as a plastic surgeon in being able to address Malika's physical trauma and Malika's capacity to meet Kate's rhythm and engage in a way that other people had not been able to, enables this bond to develop and to grow, and ultimately for them both to accept themselves as they are. And then of course things take a twist at the end, which I won't go into too much because it's at the end, but it's that relationship, that healing relationship, and that sense of acceptance that develops between the two women during their time in Melbourne.
As a reader, I couldn't help but draw parallels between Malika's story and that of the world-renowned human rights activist Malala Yousafzai. The missionary priests who visit the village know of her academic brilliance, and they consequently fear for her life against a backdrop of non-existent educational opportunities for girls, really. And then they are the ones that arrange for her to go to Melbourne to study, but then she's brutally attacked. So I wondered if that was something that you had in mind when you were writing Malika's story.
No, I think that's extraordinary. I hadn't been across that, and that's clearly my deficiency. But it's very much Malika's story, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. The brutality of the attack on Malika was breathtaking, and it really served to highlight the plight of young girls like Malala and Malika who, were bright and who had potential and were so stifled.
Anything that would remove that bondage would become a threat. Having said that, of course, certainly in urban Pakistan, there's a lot more freedom and capacity to progress now than there used to be, but how far it extends into the rural communities is another matter.
Malika's emotional fortitude in response to what happened to her, her determination to work on her mathematical theorems and to live up to everyone's expectations of her was remarkable, to say the least. And I think, or I felt, a large part of that was cultural. For example, at one point she says to Kate, "In the village, we must live with what happens even when it is very wrong." So I wondered, did you find it difficult to write, Malika?
As a 60-year-old man having difficulty writing about a 15-year-old girl from Pakistan.
Yes,
Why should
exactly.
that be difficult? I think that one of the things that has struck me about people who are brilliant beyond measure, on the other hand, high achievers globally, is their strength of mind. They are driven almost to achieve what they know they must achieve, to do it regardless of the odds. And I think that the underlying core came through for me and was the guiding principle of asking myself, what would Malika do in this situation? She had to see past all the temporary and superficial obstacles. You know, her time at school in Melbourne is not easy, and somehow she had to have the strength and the purpose to get through that. And that, I think, is common to very smart people, as I say, who are on a mission. And that was really, Malika was on a mission. That enabled that development. So when, for instance, when the principal of the school doesn't want to hand back her passport, she doesn't make a great song and dance, but by the same token, she wasn't leaving the room until she had that passport. That was kind of, for me, a guide to the responses and the attitudes that Malika would have. Expressing that through a relatively young girl, I had to validate the story sometimes with my own daughter, to be honest, and she was very helpful, as always. Ultimately, if it felt real, it was usually right.
Equally remarkable was Kate, I have to say, in that, you know, as you said, she carried a great deal of emotional baggage from a difficult relationship with her mother, but also from her own traumatic experiences. But notwithstanding, she was a brilliant doctor. She had a big heart. She was a nuanced character that I felt a great deal of respect for, and so badly wanted for her to find more balance and happiness in her life. Was she based on a real life person?
I've got to be careful here, don't I? Yes, she was, but not just one. There were probably 2 or 3 people who came into the mix. They had common traits, that desire to do the right thing by their patient. She is a surgeon, and surgeons are not always easy people. I'm a physician, and so I can say that quite clearly with a clear conscience, but they are known to be single-minded and to see things their way and not wanting to broker discussion. By the same token, I had to give Kate that, and this is actually based on a physician friend of mine, I had to give Kate that capacity to learn and to grow, that her heart hadn't closed off. She hadn't been so permanently damaged by her past that there wasn't hope. And I think that made her quite a unique character. As you said, she had that nuanced feel about her that I felt came through in the end as being real and also revealing.
Did you have any qualms writing 2 female characters? I mean, not only one, you know, culturally so far removed and 15, but a second female character.
I suppose they wouldn't leave me alone. That was the problem. They kept at me. And so in their own way, they were real. And then it became quite easy. To be honest, how can I put this? Yes, there were times when I had to ask around a bit and see what bounce off some queries from female friends and doctors and just get a feel for where they might be at. But by and large, the characters were there, which made it so much easier. My observation also is that although it's a very hot topic today, that the key and core differences between women and men, I still think that what brings us together is greater than what separates us, that we are still underneath it all people and we all still have similar emotions. They may be expressed in different ways, but they're still there. I kind of trusted in that and let it go to some extent, and it seems to have played out.
Few people outside the medical profession would truly understand the kinds of pressures that doctors who work across both the public and private systems here in Australia endure. And I think with Kate, you were able to convey the dilemma many highly trained specialists face.
Hmm.
Was this something you consciously wanted to address?
Yes, I think doctors themselves do become conflicted in their work, and it's something we always have to be aware of, that private-public mix. I think to enable people to recognise that sometimes we are actually torn, and sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day to do what's needed to be done, and that may not be anybody's fault, but it can be very difficult to understand if you're the patient at the end of it. That's not to say, it's not to say that we adopt the attitude that characters like, it was fun writing her, Sam, had, but nonetheless, some recognition of our limits is really important, and it's something we don't, as doctors, it's something we don't always accept easily, that we do have limits and we can't always take on everything and expect it to work perfectly normally.
Tell me about the title. What does it say about this novel, and what does it say about both Kate and Malika?
I suppose the title, As Swallows Fly, is meant to indicate, as is expressed through the book, that it's not necessarily the birds in a flight of such birds as swallows. It's not necessarily the ones in the front that actually determine the course. And small things happen on the periphery, and then suddenly the whole flight changes. And if you've actually looked at one in flight, they rotate and turn. And I think that's the way life is, that we can't really expect our own internal drivers to produce the results that we want or expect. We have to recognize that this is a very complex, even banal calling it complex, life evolves in ways we can't understand is probably a better way of putting it. And opportunities arise. We are part of the periphery at one point and then part of the centre at another point. The nature and the flow and the ebb of the novel, I think, reflects that, and hence the title.
You may know that there are many writers who listen to this podcast, and I'm sure many would be fascinated to learn how you managed to write this novel around your busy medical career. Can you give us some insight into this?
Take it as read that if you want to do something, you've just got to crack on with it and do it. There's always excuses and there's always explanations for not doing something, and life grabs us all and makes us busy. But I think that if you don't do it, it doesn't happen. So the time that I got to do it was usually at night, often into the small hours, grabbing time on weekends and between various things that by that time largely grown kids were requiring, and taking it on holidays and just keeping at it until it was done, just keeping at it. So spending an hour sometimes, which was all I had, was all I could hope for that day, and that was it. And some days I couldn't write anything, and then every now and then I got a really great run on, and it made all the difference. I think it's the same for everybody. If you don't do it, it doesn't happen. So you have to make that choice.
Given your experiences with the publication of As Swallows Fly, can you offer aspiring writers out there any tips about either the writing process or seeking publication of their novel?
I'm pretty new to this, as you know, Claudine. I'm not quite sure how much my experience reflects the norm, but I had a couple of writing mentors in particular, Anthony Jacques in Melbourne and also Tony Jordan. They were both brilliant in their own way, and Tony in particular went through the work with me and seemed to think that it showed potential, and then one thing led to another, and her agent thought that it might also be worth a fly, Jane Novak, and Jane's been brilliant and very, very supportive over the time that it took to get picked up. I found that inner route was so much more worthwhile and productive than trying to sell yourself and put yourself and delivering manuscripts to publishers in the hope that someone would pick it up that way. It is that inner route. That to me made all the difference, yeah.
Are you working on something else at the moment?
I am, actually. I've just finished the first draft of another novel which is actually set in Exmouth in WA. What I'm interested in again is it's about a completely different set of characters. Having said that, if there's enough interest in the current novel, I have kind of nursed the thought of coming back to see the characters 20 years later, but that's in fantasy at the moment. But this novel that I've finished the draft on looks at our lives as we are in the backdrop of a timeless land, I can't help but feel that as beings on this planet, what we do seems so vitally important, and in some ways it is, and in other ways we have the briefest speck of time here and then we're gone. It's an interesting perspective that others have written about, of course, but also I find fascinating that so much of what we find important is superficial and in passing. And again, coming back to the flight of swallows, it's ephemeral. One day heading this direction, another day we're heading another direction because events have transpired to ensure that we do that. So our most heartfelt beliefs are sometimes revealed to the transitory notions that they really are. It's an interesting balance.
Lawrence, if readers wanted to connect with you or learn more about your writing, how could they do that?
As we discussed, Claudine, probably the best at the moment is through the Ventura website. I have already had a few inquiries and discussed a few things that way. And they're very good at passing things on. And if it looks like it might become more than that, then on an individual level, I could certainly engage through the email, but probably the website at this stage is the best way.
Lawrence, As Swallows Fly was a remarkable, poignant story of survival, identity and empowerment that I thoroughly enjoyed. I wish you every success with it and with your future writing. Thank you for joining me on Talking Aussie Books.
Claudine, thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, that's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on iTunes or drop me a line via my Instagram at Claudine Tinellis or on my webpage, claudinetинellis.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time, happy reading.